I'm here in rural Michigan to drive the all-new 2024 Buick Envista. In fact, I will be driving this vehicle on some of the very roads that engineers used to actually develop it. So without any further ado, let's hop behind the wheel and give it a go.
Motrolix.
This is the ST, the Sport Touring trim, which all it really means is that it's trimmed, particularly on the outside, with some gloss black accents, and it's made to look a bit sportier. So right now I'm going 55 miles an hour on a back road. In fact, according to GM engineers, some of these roads that I'll be driving on today, they actually used during the development process of the Envista. So that's pretty cool. It's not every day that I get to drive a vehicle on the same roads where the vehicle was developed. So right now at around 50 miles an hour, the Envista feels, in a word, good. There's not much coming into the cabin from an NVH standpoint, meaning noise, vibration, and harshness. So it's a very smooth vehicle right now on a relatively smooth road. We'll see when the road gets bumpy what happens then. But yeah, as of right now, it is a nice, smooth, relaxed, composed, and confident dance partner. We have a kind of a nice long sweeper coming up, and yeah, it is taking the sweeper quite well. The steering isn't all that disconnected either. I would have expected this to have kind of a more disconnected steering feel. It's a little bit weighted. It's actually not bad at all. Here's another kind of long sweeper here. It's a bit tighter. Yeah, it takes it. It takes it really well. I went at it at 50 miles an hour, and this can be a very fun driving vehicle when you want it to be. When you don't want it to be, it can just be a relaxing, comfortable, quiet, tech-laden cruiser with quite a bit of space, both in the front row as well as in the second row. So what I'm getting here is that the Envista is kind of a dual-natured vehicle. It can be a relaxed cruiser and one that's comfortable, relaxed, and perfectly comfortable in its own skin in doing all of that, or it can play when you want it to play. Now, what I am gathering here, just from the first few minutes of being behind the wheel, what I'm gathering here is that it is not as fun as the Chevy Trax. The Chevy Trax is, as some of you who watched my video on that a few months ago, the Chevy Trax is a very fun car to drive. It is a corner carver. It is, it's not a speed demon, nor is it meant to be, but it is surprisingly agile. Whereas the Envista, it's still agile. It's still pretty good in that department, in the agility department, but it doesn't feel all that happy to play. It can still play, don't get me wrong, but it's just not as exact, not as precise, and not as agile. The ride itself through the twisties, it's composed. There's not much chassis chatter. There's not much when it comes to tire noise. I'm not getting any of that kind of feedback from the tires at all, which is great. And there's really not much noise coming into the cabin whatsoever. Going about 50 miles an hour right now. It's just nice. It's just a nice place to be. I can have a conversation without raising my voice, without having to shout across the cabin, which is something that I personally have to do when driving my daily driver, which, as some of you know, is a Corvette C7 Grand Sport. Now, of course, these are two different vehicles, and the Corvette's a whole different beast compared to the Buick Envista, so there is that. Let's talk about the visibility and the seat, the driving position, these kinds of things. The visibility is good. The front windshield is big. The cowl is low, and I am able to see perfectly what's in front of me. I also do like the fact that I do get to see some of the hood. The ability to see some of the hood gives me kind of this feel that I'm driving something substantial, something that's not, you know, an econo box, but rather something that has, you know, some lines to it, something that has some body to it. So forward visibility, it's great. The visibility sideways is actually pretty good through the front 2 windows, and I can certainly say the same thing about the rear 2 windows. In fact, since the rear doors are actually bigger than the front doors, the glass of the rear doors is also bigger than that of the front doors, which means better visibility overall. In fact, the Envista has a lot of glass, and that was done according to designers and engineers that I spoke to. That was very much done on purpose to basically create a vehicle that doesn't feel like you're, you know, constrained and kind of in this space where you're, you know, kind of wrapped by all kinds of sheet metal, but instead give the vehicle more glass and make it more airy, make it more spacious, give it that kind of feel, that kind of environment. And in that regard, the vehicle engineers and designers certainly have achieved their goal. So the visibility is good forward and through any of the side windows. Now let's talk about the visibility going out towards the back, and this is where the Envista kind of doesn't deliver superb levels of visibility. In fact, the rear window, what I can see through the rear window, is very much limited. And if I just look in the rear view mirror here, there's really a kind of a sliver of a window that I'm able to see, and it's not a problem for me right now. I don't know if it would actually present a problem if I were, say, in a in an environment where there was a lot more traffic. But yeah, as it stands right now, the visibility isn't that great out back. Not really all that problematic either. Other than that, the wing mirrors, the outside mirrors, do a great job of showing me what's on either side of the vehicle. The mirrors are nice and big. They have a good amount of glass to them as well, so that's really nice. And I think that concludes the visibility story. Now on to the seat. The seat itself is quite comfortable. There's quite a bit of cushioning here. I don't feel that the seat is hard. I actually feel that it's quite plushy and quite nice. The one thing that I'm not a big fan of, and this is something that's not unique to the Envista, in fact, this is something that is really true for all GM vehicles over the past 10 to, I'd say, probably even 15 years, is that the headrest. It is adjustable up and down, but it doesn't tilt. So you can't tilt this headrest, you can't push it back, you can't move it forward in case you want to do that. It is fixed in the fore and aft position, and that's something that, again, I'm not particularly a big fan of. As for the armrests, let's talk about those. Unlike the Chevy Trax, the Buick Envista has soft materials padding the outboard armrest, this one here. And it is quite soft. In the Trax, this outboard armrest is a hard plastic, and it's not lined, it's not wrapped in any kind of soft material. In the Envista, that's not the case at all. This is, it's not the softest of armrests, but it is lined at least with kind of the soft, clothy, or I actually don't even know what material this is. It could be a soft urethane type of material. It actually has an interesting pattern to it, and I think that's why I can't make out exactly what kind of material it is. But suffice it to say that it is soft, and it is a substantial improvement over the outboard armrest in the Chevy Trax. The center armrest, it is also quite comfortable, a lot softer than the outboard armrest, and that is good. And this armrest here, the center one, it's not adjustable, so you can't raise it, you can't lower it. It's in a fixed position. But overall, if I put both hands on the wheel, roughly at the 3 and the 9 o'clock marks, I think it actually delivers quite a comfortable seating position overall. Something else that I want to point out is the steering wheel. I really am a fan of the steering wheel overall. It is leather wrapped, and not only does it look good to the eye, but it also feels good in the hands. And then the final thing I'll say about the steering wheel is that I do like the fact that it has a flat bottom type of setup. You know, typically flat bottom steering wheels have been reserved for sports cars because of the leg clearance, and it allows you to do some things like heel to toe shifting and stuff like that. In the case of the Envista, obviously you're not going to be doing any of that. There's really none of that to be done in the first place. But the fact that the steering wheel does have this flat bottom configuration, it just kind of gives the car a nice sporty kind of feel. I'm also a fan of this shifter, or essentially the gear selector, if you will. I don't think it's actually considered a shifter per se, because I'm actually not really shifting anything. I'm just putting it into gear. So the gear selector here, it actually has a very nice shape to it and a nice form. It feels good in the hand, and it also looks good. As for the acceleration, what I'll do right now is kind of in the middle of a nice road. There's nobody next to me, nobody around me, and that will give me the ability to mash the throttle and see what this engine is all about. So I'll come to a complete stop, and here we go. Pedal to the metal, 20, 30, 40, 50, and I'll take it to 60. There's 60 right there. This isn't the most powerful vehicle, but this engine does get the job done as far as allowing it to accelerate. So you won't be breaking any records, any 0 to 60 records with the Envista or this engine, but I don't think that is ultimately the purpose. In fact, I know that this is not the purpose of the Envista to begin with. So as far as serving as a engine for getting from A to B in comfort and style, and with all kinds of tech, I think that this engine does a fine job. Now, a few of you have asked about the engine and the kinds of sounds that the engine makes. This isn't the best sounding engine per se. I mean, it's not like it's very quiet, or it doesn't really sound all that refined either, but the engine does get the job done. So for instance, if I were to slow down right here a bit and accelerate, so I'm going to plant the throttle here right now, it sounds fine. I know that there were a few of you who were concerned about sound that this engine may or may not make. I personally don't really hear any kind of things that would cause me to have concerns, or really anything that sounds bad. The 6-speed transmission does a good job of shifting. I haven't yet caught the Envista being in a strange gear, in a wrong gear, and I haven't really experienced any kind of odd or strange or unwanted shifting behaviors. So from that standpoint, the powertrain does a great job. Front wheel drive is the only combination that the Envista is available in. There is no all-wheel drive option, and that is very much for a reason. That reason is that for those who do want all-wheel drive, they will have to step up to the Buick Encore GX within the Buick lineup. And really, that's the whole point. The Envista, it is meant to hit a certain price point. It hits that price point, in my opinion, very well. And for those who want all-wheel drive, then the more premium and also the more pricey Encore GX is available. All right, I do have some opportunity to put the Envista ST through its paces. I'm going to do that right now. Yep. So I've got some tires are breaking some contact with the pavement, which you may have just heard. But even when they did that, the car still felt planted. The trade-off here is that you do have a bit less precision, but the flip side of that is a more comfortable ride in the Envista than in the Trax. That is part of the equation here, and I think that aligns really well with Buick's overall market positioning, right? Buick, over the last decade, has become positioned as this kind of premium brand that is not necessarily a luxury brand in a full vein of being a luxury brand, but it is somewhere that is certainly above mainstream brands like, for instance, Chevrolet. And so in that regard, the softer tune to the suspension delivers a more relaxing ride, a more premium ride. You can certainly feel that right here as I experience some of the bumps in these backcountry Michigan roads. I should also note that despite the Envista ST that I'm driving right now, despite this particular vehicle riding on 19-inch wheels, which are, you know, in the grand scheme of things, it is a large wheel. Despite this being the case, there isn't much as far as tire noise, as far as kind of anything related to a rough ride that I can feel. So the ride is smooth. The suspension does a great job at soaking up the bumps and controlling the body overall. And that's great news, because what typically happens when you get a larger wheel, like a 19-inch wheel, is you get the wheel and it looks great when you look at the vehicle from the outside, but then when you get in and start driving it, well, that typically results in a rougher driving experience that might not be as smooth as one would desire. Well, that is not the case here in the Envista ST. There's a distinct mechanical difference between this model and the base, the preferred trim. And that difference is the presence of a Watts-Link rear suspension, which is, first and foremost, it's available as an option on the ST. It is standard on the Avenir. On the ST, it is optional only with the Experience Buick package. And essentially, that package includes a set of 19-inch wheels, and that's where the Watts-Link suspension comes into play. The Watts-Link suspension is not available on the base preferred trim. And the whole purpose of the Watts-Link rear suspension is ultimately really to deliver a better driving experience, be it a smoother driving experience or one that is more sporty, or one that's more sporting, if you will. Overall, the Buick Envista is a very good vehicle, at least from what I've been able to tell thus far in my the first couple of hours of driving it. It looks great, in my opinion. I know that looks are subjective, obviously, but it looks great from the outside. It has very unique styling, a very nice, unique shape that traditionally has been reserved for high-end luxury cars from Europe. But the Envista brings that kind of shape down to essentially the masses. With a roughly $25,000 starting price, it really is a crossover coupe for the masses. But beyond that, driving the Envista is a very nice and relaxing experience. This is not a vehicle that begs to be pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed through the turns like the Trax. The Trax is really different. It has a different demeanor, a different persona, and a different driving experience, different suspension setup, so on and so forth. The Envista, on the other hand, is very much a softer spoken, a softer footed kind of a vehicle that essentially, well, it really is a premium kind of a vehicle in the purest sense of the word. This is not something that you want to race in. This is not something that you want to push. This is something that you want to get in and enjoy the driving experience. Enjoy how quiet and isolated you are. It's as if you're kind of in a bubble here, and that's, I think, the whole point of Buick. That's the whole point of quiet tuning, and I think the team at Buick really hit this one out of the ballpark. For GMAuthority.com and the Motrolix Network, I'm Alex Luft. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Motrolix.